Good morning everyone. My name is Vijay Gupta and you are watching biology classes. So welcome to all of you in this lecture of biology. Student, today I will start a new topic, that is pollination. It is very important for all my 12th students and also for the BSc second student. So let's start the video. Before knowing the definition of pollination and types of pollination, I would like to tell you about a basic structure of angiospermic flower. That we all know that the angiospermic plant consists of flowers, and flowers are the reproductive organs of an angiospermic plant. In a simple flower, there are four main parts present, which are calyx, corolla, endoecium and gynoecium, in which endoecium is the male part while the gynoecium is the female part. As you can see in this diagram, this is the diagram of a flower, and you can see in this diagram there are total 4 holes present in a flower. The outermost is calyx, the next one is corolla, another one is endoecium, and the innermost hole is known as gynoecium. So in this diagram, as you can see, this is the gynoecium, and these are the endoecium. Endoecium is the male organ while the gynoecium is the female organ, and the single unit of endoecium is known as stamen. So it is a stamen, and it is the single unit of stamen of endoecium. The upper part is known as anther. As you can see in this diagram, these are the anther and these are the filament. So the whole structure is known as endoecium, while a single unit is known as stamen. Inside the anther, pollen grains are produced by the process of microsporogenesis. So these are the pollen grains which are produced inside the anther. In the middle of the flower, the gynoecium is present, that is the female part of the flower. In the gynoecium, the uppermost part is known as stigma, the middle one is known as style, while the lowermost part is known as ovary, which consists of ovule. So this is the basic structure of flower. Now what the pollination is, when the pollen grains present inside the anther transfer from anther to the stigma of the flower, this phenomenon is known as pollination. So what about the definition? As I described before, pollination is defined as, you can define the pollination as the process of transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma. These are the pollen grains, and these pollen grains are produced inside the anther, and after liberation from the anther, these pollen grains transfer to the stigma, and the phenomenon is known as pollination. So the pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the same flower or the different flowers of the same species. Now what is the concept? Suppose that this is a plant, and this plant consists of numerous flowers. This is a single flower. Now the pollen grains produced inside the anther. So if the pollen grains reaches on the stigma of the same flower or any different flowers of the same species or a different plant, this phenomenon is known as pollination. So the flower may be the same flower or the same flower of the same plant, different flower of the same plant, or the different plants. So all these conditions are termed as pollination. This simply means the transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of a flower is known as pollination. So I think the definition is very clear to you. Now I will tell you about the types of pollination. What about the types of pollination? Pollination is generally of two types. The first one is self-pollination, another one is the cross-pollination. Now what is the meaning of self-pollination? When the pollen grains of a flower reaches on the stigma of the same flower or different flower on a same plant, then this condition is known as self-pollination. So you can divide these two conditions into two different parts. So the self-pollination can be divided into two types, the autogamy and the geitonogamy. Now what is the autogamy? Autogamy means when the pollination occurs between the organs of same flower. Suppose that this is a flower of any kind of species, maybe mango, papaya, whatever. So the pollen grains reaches to the stigma, are transferred to the stigma on the same flower. On the same flower, this is the anther. This consists of pollen grains, and the pollen grains reaches from anther to the stigma of same flower. This is termed as autogamy. But when the pollen grains of a flower reaches on the stigma of another flower of the same plant, then this condition is known as geitonogamy. So both are the self pollination, and there are two conditions in self pollination. First one is autogamy and the second one is geitonogamy. In autogamy, the pollen grains transfer from the anther to stigma of the same flower, while in geitonogamy, the pollen grains of a flower transfer to the stigma of different flowers of the same plant. This condition is known as geitonogamy. So, as you can see, same flower, autogamy, and different flowers of the same plant is known as geitonogamy. Now, the next term is, what is the cross pollination? Now, what about the cross pollination? The cross pollination is a phenomenon in which the pollen grains of one plant reaches to the stigma of another plant of the same species. Both the plants, as you can see on the board, both the plants are similar, have the same species, maybe mango plant or apple or banana, whatever. So, both the plants are similar, have the same species. Now, the pollen grains of this flower reaches to the stigma of this flower. Plants have same species, but the plants are different. So, you can see the transfer of pollen grains from one flower to another flower of different plant of same species, then this condition is known as cross pollination. As you can see, different flower of different plants. So, this is the flower, this is another flower, but the plant is different, of the same species, but the species of both the plants are same. So, this condition is known as cross pollination. Now, cross pollination occurs with the help of different kinds of methods. I will discuss these methods in my next video, that the cross pollination occurs maybe through the air, that is called as air pollination. It occurs through the water, that is called water pollination. It maybe occurs through the insects, that is called insect pollination or the entomophily. So, I will describe all these terms in my next video. In this video, I told you about the pollination definition, a basic structure of angiospermic flower, and about the types of pollination, which are self pollination and cross pollination, and also describe about two terms of self pollination, autogamy and the geitonogamy. So, I think all the concept of this video is very clear to you. In the next lecture, I will tell you about the different methods of cross pollination. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.